I'd end up with like 30 minutes of good, solid conversation. We're going to share through Second Amendment organization and add to this series of people that I know and respect inside of the community who do deal with people outside of the gun community. Now, there's debate, is there even a gun community? What's gun community mean? What I'm really talking about is people that don't hold the same opinion of us, right? So people who are either on the fence about guns or people who are anti-gun or pro-gun control, whether they're gun owners or not. These are people that we as advocates need to be able to talk to. We need to be able to talk to effectively. We need to be able to talk to in a way that influences them. And we have done like zero prep, but I've known you to do outreach. I've known you to speak as a gun rights advocate in the political world, in the media world, and thought you would be a great addition to our conversation. So with that, Jerah, what's your mind? Where's your mind right now in terms of this contentious time, right? Because we have a time when gun control is not just ever present right now. It's in our face. It's getting more aggressive. It's getting ramped up. The third anniversary of the Parkland shooting was 2 days ago on Sunday. And we have the first, I think really the first overt mention of gun control from the Biden administration since he's been inaugurated. So less than a month in, he says it's time. We're not going to wait for another tragedy. We're going to do it now. What are you saying to people in your world who are saying, I'm with you, Joe, let's do it?
I think that we have to remember that when we are fighting for liberty, when we are trying to get in front of things like this, when we are trying to be advocates for something that is such a fundamental right, most of the time we're doing it in the middle of someone else's most incredible life pain. And I think that's what makes it so easy to manipulate, is you have people that come in to the situation, the Joe Bidens and the Kamala Harrises and the Hillary Clintons, all these sort of anti-gun, gun control people, and they say, look, we can save you from this. We can help you with this. We can make this better by taking away these things or trying to control these things. And you and I have always had a very different view on religion. Tries to do too much like that, when they try to control our vulnerability, it really does borderline on idolatry. And that's one thing that we can't have. And your government is never going to be able to save you on that minute of a scale. Now, when we're talking about, foreign threats, when we're talking about nation against nation, that's when your government steps in. That's when the military steps in. That's when we're supposed to be on high alert. And that's when we're supposed to depend on the nucleus of our government and our military to help save us. But when we're talking about individual to individual, when we're talking robber to victim, sexual assault to victim, your government can't save you on that minute of a scale, and it has to be up to you, and that has to be your own personal responsibility. So
you're stacking up a little bit, Jerah, and I think that it may be a buffering issue. I'm not sure. So I want to go back because there was a couple comments, and it cut out for me too, and I saw a couple comments that make it look like some people missed maybe the beginning of that. I think you said that either you and I or you and someone else approach something differently or have a different understanding?
You and I have had a fundamentally different approach on just religion in general.
Oh, okay. I missed that part.
Yeah. And so when someone who's a Christian looks at gun control, we look at it as when your government tries to step in on such a scale to where they say, I can save you on such a minute scale, that really borderlines on idolatry.
Okay, I agree like 1,000% on that. And I think that for some people, the government, the nation becomes a religion, right? And I think for some people, the Constitution is a religious document. I've heard people say that, right? And I'm not thinking that to someone who really has a faith, religion, lifestyle, and practice and belief structure, that those things equate. in nearly the same way. Maybe I've never heard it put that way, or I've never thought about it that way, but what you're saying is really interesting, because yeah, when you're saving your soul, that's different from like protect me from Russia.
Right. Exactly. And so I really feel like people have farmed out their safety to the point where, you know, do something has become a whine more than anything. Somebody needs to do something. Well, why can't it be you? Why can't you do something to save yourself? You know, why can't you take that responsibility on your own? And so I think that we have obviously, and we have had I think one of the best ways it was ever put to me is, you know, when anti-gun people, and notice I don't say the left, I say anti-gun people.
Right.
So when anti-gun people say, nobody's coming to take your guns, Obama never took your guns, Joe Biden's never going to take your guns, Bill Clinton never tried to take your guns, but they tried though. And that's the problem, is just because they weren't successful at it doesn't mean that I'm not upset that they tried.
So it's, yeah, and even if it's not, if you can't point to the try, the intention or the desire or the interest, right? Even because I do differentiate between anti-gun person and pro-gun control person. So absolutely, I think that's a very common theme, right? Like, what are you worried about? Like, you always talk about they're going to take your guns, but no one, that guy, that girl, no one's taking your guns, Rob. You got plenty of guns. You got like purple guns and pink guns and 3D printed guns, and you got guns. You're good. And it's, well, but what if I relax like you want me to, what happens then? Does someone take the guns? Does someone want to take the guns? Does someone take the fact that I'm not refuting their legitimacy and even wanting to take my guns? Does somebody take that as permission from me? And I think that's a very valid direction. You know, it's interesting. We have, in the previous 2 episodes, we've talked mostly, I think, about people who sort of are curious. But now we're talking about how do we address the people that are either dismissive of our concerns or actually want to take away our guns?
Well, God, you know, I've had just such an information overload, especially over the last year, being a firearms instructor in 2020, when we've had the most recorded gun sales in history, and meeting a lot of those people in my area and recognizing that they actually had a completely different mindset on this prior to the events of 2020, right? So you had a pandemic, coupled with a lot of other things that happened. And I think that those particular people that went out and purchased those firearms that had a different mindset prior to 2020 really learned how fragile their own safety is, and that physics dictates that no one's coming to save you. I mean, it's science. At the end of the day, no one's just going to show up and magically, save you. And so I think that, I think that what the question was is, how do we talk to those people? Is that what you asked me? What do we say to the anti-gun people? What do we,
I thought you had a very compelling, that line you have, that the idea that at a small scale, the government could be there. I had a conversation with a French guy. It was an Irish bar in Germany with a French guy, a friend of a friend, and he said he didn't understand the whole gun thing, kind of went there. It's like, okay, about personal defense, self-preservation. Do you believe in the right self-preservation? That's a common ground that most humans have. Yep, absolutely, but not guns, not when it comes to big violence. Okay, well, what protects you? And he went to the government, right? Well, the government protects me. And I said, well, and this is just Gatorade, but I had like a cider or whatever, so a mug or some kind of pint glass. So, well, I mean, I could pick this up right now and just like smash it against your head. Like, I'm not going to do it. And I wasn't being bravado or mean. As an example, I can pick this up and hit you against your head. Like, there's no government here, right? There's like, it doesn't work right now. Well, but you would be punished. Okay, so fear, like you're relying on the government to intimidate me into not doing what I want. Well, but it's the right thing to do. I said, well, shouldn't that be enough, right? And if it's not enough, because we agree there are some people that it's the right thing to do, not hitting you in the face is the right thing to do. Some people won't do that. you need to be able to protect yourself because the government won't be there, literally, that the government's not here and I can hit you right now. So you need to be prepared to defend yourself. Does that make sense? And it was just such a foreign concept to this guy, right? And yet you now have people, have you changed? Because you've had these people come to you who a year ago would have never have thought they'd be buying a gun. Has it changed, A, your opinion of whether or not people change, B, your opinion of how to deal with them when they show up, and then C, where are you in terms of how you deal with them? Has that changed?
So my whole business is very introductory training. And I think that one of the big changes, that I've seen is people who have bought these guns, didn't really believe, in the Second Amendment, that came to get, which was the responsible thing to do, is get training after you buy the gun, right? And they realize how easy it actually is to learn to shoot a gun. I think that I've seen a lot of minds change on whether or not they think this should be a fundamental right that everyone should have. So I've seen a ton of minds change, although there's still this huge differential between, well, this is a handgun, but I'm not on the AR bandwagon. And I don't think people should have assault rifles. And that's the way that they put it. And then when you tell them that's not actually what that means, whenever I know that I'm doing a lesson with someone who is maybe anti-gun before, because they always kind of tell me that whenever they're booking lessons with me,
Sure.
I bring my AR anyway. And I let them, plink around with it. And most of the time they're like, this isn't that bad. And, so I think we're seeing a big mind shift change, in that regard. And then I've also learned a lot about these people individually and why they had that thought process to begin with. And a lot of them, most of them had that thought process to begin with because it was instilled in them through generations of anti-gun mindset that was brainwashing from the government that says, we can save you. We can help you. If you just vote for us this way, we can take these guns away from these people that mean to harm you. But really what they're doing is, as we know, turning law-abiding citizens into criminals. And furthermore, my mindset on that is, why should I be punished for something that you are too lazy to learn?
Right. Sure.
That's all it really comes down to, is they want to take away your right to something and they're too lazy to learn it. And I figured that out when I went to testify in the gun rights hearings that they had in Dallas, at Brookhaven College a couple of years ago. And I sat there in front of our there were like 16 representatives of our Texas House that were talking about gun control. They were talking about homeland security. They were talking about this in such a way that we protect people from active shooters and all of this. And everyone came to testify. I mean, people that used to be in the FBI, people that were in violent crime task forces, people who, representatives from Facebook that were sent by Mark Zuckerberg came to testify in this. And the one thing that I found that was a huge constant is even the people that ran on Second Amendment platforms in our own Texas House had no idea about the physics or the kinesiology or the neuroscience that I learned in your class behind the firearm. And they were just they were talking about scenarios that could never possibly exist.
There's a lot of that, but that myth, right, or the cliche that people get these talking points, right? It becomes about talking points. Like, well, here's what I always tell people, and what I'm hearing you say is that you have learned over time. There isn't an always talk to people this way. There isn't a one size fits all, but there's some pieces to look out for, and there's some things to be ready for. You have expressed now in this segment, and it lived, obviously, at least over the last year, this very, very stark reality of, okay, somebody was here, I'm not ever going to own a gun. I don't know what people need to own a gun. It seems like a lot of responsibility to give them that would be hard to learn how to do properly without, training, mandatory, whatever. So I'm against it being a civil right. And then they're like, ooh, I'm really glad it was easy to get this, but I still need training. So I'm going to take this seriously and do it, and then get the training. It's like, oh, you know what? That wasn't that hard. Like, I can spend 4 hours and be comfortable and I can spend 4 days and be competent at a level to feel like I can have a gun staged in my house or carried it in public. And the barrier to entry to feeling that comfort and then gaining some level of competency isn't what I think a lot of people might imagine. So what do you now say? Let's shift a little bit. What do you say to the person in the gun community? Because we hear this all the time. There's no use talking to them. They'll never change their mind. They're fixed in their ways. They're brainwashed. They just eat up what the government tells them, and it's not worth the time. It's no use. What do you say there?
That's just a lazy mindset. That's super lazy. It's a lack of effort, and that's not what the gun community has ever been about, was lack of effort. I mean, so if we're gonna, to me, you're just being a quitter. If you don't have the mindset or the wherewithal or the effort to continue to have these conversations time and time and time and time again, because that's what it takes, okay, then are you truly a representative of the 2A community, or are you just ready to quit on people? Or are you just ready to devalue people to the point of discrimination once again?
Are you of the mindset that it's more laziness or more almost like victim mentality, like the idea that there's this they that has to be, because you said dehumanize, like there's this they that has to be they, and we can't fix them, we can't work with them, we can't talk to them. I'm incredibly impressed. I have to do something desperate. Sort of is a line that I think I see in people's logic, at least as much as they're not worth my time. Do you see that much, or do you recognize that?
I don't know that I would classify it as victim mentality. I think that the general Second Amendment community is just so frustrated. They don't understand how people can't view this as a common sense thing, right? So a lot of anti-gun people say, well, we need common sense, gun control. Okay. No, we just need you to have common sense. Okay. We just need you to understand that it's a common sense thing for us to be able to defend ourselves, right? And instructors, at least they should be, we already teach this mindset of shooting people over property is stupid. We already teach this mindset of it's got to be imminent harm, like has to be facing you. We already teach that. So what's the point of repealing laws like stand your ground? We're already teaching the mindset. So I think that, the Second Amendment community is just frustrated. We're frustrated too that we don't have adequate representation in our government. I went back from, when I testified in that gun rights hearings, I went back through every single one of those representative social media pages, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all of them that were available at the time. I went back 2 years on each one, and not one single House representative in Texas, of all states, ever encouraged the citizens of their district to gain for themselves a self-defense education. They weren't calling for support of these gun range small businesses. They weren't calling for support of instructors who could teach them how to do this adequately and well and be super.
Uh-oh.
We need good representation.
You cut out there in a, maybe towards the end, but I heard you were listing that they hadn't encouraged people to support the local businesses. They hadn't encouraged people to get the training. They'd encouraged people to get their own means of defense. And you were talking, and then kind of ended it with the representation issue. Did I miss anything?
Yes. And then one more thing too is, a big, huge part of this discussion at this gun rights hearing was, how do we combat active shooters? And my point was, you should be advocating for the citizens of your district to gain for themselves a self-defense education or a firearms education if they choose, because it's always a choice, because physics dictates that the only people that can purposefully respond to a threat like that are the people that are already there. So you're wanting this magic to happen that's never going to happen. It is up to the people who happen to be in the vicinity of the threat to deal with the threat. And if they're incapable of doing it because they've never been educated or encouraged by their leadership of their state to be educated, then we're all screwed.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. All the how are we going to stop the next active shooter thing? I remember being incredibly frustrated with the NRA's School Shield program that they came out with after Sandy Hook, which was we're going to put retired law enforcement or military and America's veterans. We're gonna fund them to get training and to be placed in schools. The schools just reach out to us, let us know, we are going to take care of you. We're going to make this happen. It's going to be great. And I thought, wow, you literally just suggested that the only people who can save the kids are trained professionals that have gone through special classes. And it's like, this is like exactly not the thing, right? Like the thing is individuals. I mean, if the only play, and the whole arming teachers as if we're like taking like the gun and just saying, here, history teacher, you're armed. That doesn't make any sense to me either, right? It's about right to carry. It's about letting people be prepared to defend themselves at work. And if the teachers choose, so be it. The principal chooses, so be it. The coach chooses, so be it. A certain amount of population chooses to be armed at the grocery store, at the insurance company office, at the telephone bank, wherever they are, letting people choose whether or not to be armed. We've got well over, I think, 40 million people with Utah now. I think we crossed the 40 million mark of the number of Americans who can legally carry right now without regard for restrictions, right? Some places you have to jump through a bunch of hoops to get those permits, but we have 40 million people who can carry concealed right now because they have a permit in a state that requires it or they live in a constitutional carry state. One of the questions that came up here was, and I'm gonna paraphrase it, so scrolling back and reading it verbatim, but it was something like, I'm a little bit worried because we've got constitutional carry and we've got all these new gun owners. Let me just jump in real quick and steal the easy low-hanging fruit. Being an experienced gun owner does not make you necessarily prepared to hold a gun in your hand in defense of yourself or others out in the real world. An 8-hour NRA basic class definitely doesn't, I'm the LTC class in Texas. I'm unaware of any mandated class that prepares you to carry that gun. It's a matter of personal responsibility to go out and get the training. And when Jerah said that she has these students who are coming to her and saying, yeah, I was surprised how easy it was to get these skills under my belt, to learn this, to become confident, to become comfortable. That's my experience as well. Now it's up to us to make sure that we're putting that kind of pressure into the system to, hey, you need to go get training. It's your right, but you must exercise these rights responsibly. So that's my thought. Like Jerah already talked about some of her experiences, but where are you personally concerned? And then after that, what do you say to someone from outside of the gun community who says, this is crazy, they don't even need a permit, they don't need any training, there must be mandatory training?
Well, and what a social experiment it would be if our elected leadership would actually publicly call for the citizens of their states, their districts, their cities, whatever, to go and get firearms training, good firearms training. And let's see what that yields, in a year or two, because they do it for other things. I mean, they've done it for African Americans. They've done it for the lesbian and gay communities. And look how far that's come. Right. And so why not do it for this? Why not do it for this gun education? I can see why people who are fearful would be concerned about all of these new gun owners with no training. I'm not fearful of it because I have an education, and I think more times than not, I can recognize a danger before it happens. I mean, that's part of training. Okay. And so I think that when we talk about, oh, that's so crazy, we're turning all these people loose, with guns and they have no training and all this, most of them are actually seeking out training. I believe that. I don't think that most of those people who bought those millions of guns in 2020 are not seeking out training. I can tell you in 2020, I had exactly 3 weeks off before people started to figure out that, they weren't as fearful of, at least in my area, as fearful of COVID as the government wanted them to be. So I started getting under the table, phone calls and text messages. Hey, will you come to my house and teach me how to use my gun? So there was a lot of dry fire practice that I did in people's houses. I trained people in their driveways. We went outside in people's backyards and did introduction to handgun with blue guns. I mean, so there was a lot of training going on in 2020. I taught 240 license to carry classes in 2020. That's a lot. That's almost one every single day. So there were a lot of people that were seeking out training that were new gun owners. So if people are on that wagon, like, oh my gosh, we've got all these new gun owners without training, they're seeking it out, and you don't need to be fearful of it.
Yeah, that the original test state, I think, for a lot of this in the gun community, because there's a lot of it. I'm going to get to this because there's a couple questions about it. We're going to finish up about 5-6 minutes. The test state for me really was Arizona. Now, the first place I could ever carry was Vermont, and under the constitutional carry rules, there was the only state that was constitutional carry at the time, and I was not 21, and I hadn't lived in a state where I could even apply for a permit up to that point at any point. So I moved up to Vermont when I was 18, and I could carry legally. Vermont was always kind of cast aside because it's a small population. It's a pretty socioeconomically and belief structurally homogeneous scenario. It's not, there's not a lot of interpersonal violent crime. There's not a lot of population density. And at the time, there was no state preemption. So the major cities, Montpelier, Burlington, Brattleboro, a couple other places, did not allow concealed carry in those cities. The municipalities could restrict it. So it was kind of written off. Yeah, you got 400,000 people and only 200,000 people live outside of those cities, and we don't care about you guys. Arizona changed all that. Arizona was the state that everybody started watching when they went constitutional carry. One of the big reasons inside of the gun community was because the training community is so strong there, right? I mean, Gunsight was there, right? Like you have your major schools. There was a lot of training that went on there. Great weather, 90% of the year. You can train outside if you don't mind being hot. 100% of the year you're outside in most of Arizona. And so there's a lot of people really thought, I remember that the Scottsdale Gun Club, I was doing a lot of work with them at the time because they were, we were aligned in a lot of design aspects when they were building that and we were running Valhalla, and people were very worried. Like, we don't even know, we were going to build a training room. Now we don't even know if we're going to need a training room. And what we found out really fast was that when you sell somebody a gun who isn't a gun person and you say, yeah, you're good, go ahead. They're like, well, yeah, but I'm thinking about carrying it in public. Oh, so you're going to want a holster. Cool. Here you go. Have fun. Like, what? Like, but can I take a class? Yeah, can I take a class? And right away, like, I mean, in like 4 seconds, it was like, oh, look, people are still taking classes. I think Arizona has where you can get a permit so that you can have reciprocity. States like, I think Mississippi is one of those states where you have the enhanced permit. If you can get a permit with nothing, or you take the other class, you get the enhanced permit. There's now graduated permitting structures in a lot of states, like there's graduated driver's licenses. And I'm not making the equation between driving and shooting, obviously, because of the civil rights issue of the Second Amendment, but the models are now set up very, very well for people like you to do 240 classes, right? Working your ass off because you were one of the, individually of the hundreds of instructors I know, you were one of the busiest humans teaching guns that I knew in 2020, and you still found 5 days to come train with us for instructor development, and you took my class one day. I mean, you went out and trained yourself as well. So I know how much time you spend on the range. What do you say to people like that in the gun community would say, nah, I'm not sure about this. I still think there should be training. I think they may not say the word mandatory, but that's what they're hinting at. How do you have those conversations?
Well, I've been torn on that myself. And I'll be honest, I've said more than once that, you know, that would be probably the only measure of gun control that I would ever support would be mandatory training. And now I've changed my mind on that. I think that we have the ability to influence people, to encourage personal responsibility. I think that most people want to be educated. But here's the thing, we have to break it down to its most foundational form, and we can't just say, go get training. You know, and this was my question at SHOT Show, whenever you were on Moss Trey's panel is, you know, do we need a revamp on what good training is? Because to me, and I'll be honest with you, to me, NRA training isn't good enough. And I think that people find it boring and expensive and long. Okay. So it's not about, are people going to go get training? Because they are. Okay. It's about how do we point them in the right direction for training, and how do we weed out bad trainers? I think that's the more important question.
Huge.
Because
yeah,
I would,
actually,
you know.
I'm sorry, there's a question in the comments. I just wanted to, like, right there for a second. There's a question or a statement in the comments after the question of, where do I find a list of firearms instructors? And somebody jumped in and said most gun ranges have ads for instructors. But this is a perfect point. Just because someone has a hat that says instructor doesn't mean they're who you need, right? Like, so my first question to someone who says, is there an app for firearms instructors? What are you trying to do? Like, what's your goal? Because if you want to be good at like shooting quail from horseback, that's a different instructor from the guy that if you're just going to carry a Glock, under your shirt at the mall. If you're going to do long range precision, you're going to be a hunter. Now, I assume most people, when they say, yeah, I just got a gun, I need an instructor, because most people buying guns in the last 20 years are buying guns primarily for defense. They want a defensive shooting instructor. But to your point, just because they teach the LTC class in Texas or a CCW class anywhere else or whatever they call it in your place, doesn't necessarily make them the person we're talking about, the person that we're advocating for, right? So
and I'd probably spend an hour of my day every day returning emails from people asking me, where do I go for this training to learn this specific thing, right? Because a lot of my clients are women naturally, and they want to know, they want the introductory, class, but then their husbands are like, hey, but you're an instructor, like, where can I learn how to do, draw from holster and lateral movement and all this kind of stuff? And then I direct them to someone like you or someone that's in my area, right? That can teach that stuff better than me, because I take that training, but I don't necessarily teach it all the time. And that's something that I figured out really early when I was starting my business was, and it was the best advice that anyone ever gave me, was an instructor that I used to work with. And he said, figure out what you're really good at and specialize in that. He was like, you don't necessarily need to go learn everything right now. He was like, just hone in on what you're really good at and specialize in that. And so I've been teaching introduction to handgun for 10 years. I never took another instructor class to teach anything else until your class in November, when I took the intuitive defensive shooting instructor course, which was amazing. So I think that, to your point, yes, there does need to be this database of people, and not just that they are instructors, but what they specialize in, along with their reviews that people can read and go, do I want to go take a class for this person? Because you could go take a basic instructor, basic pistol instructor class through the NRA that's 2 days long. You could have a few years of gun experience just in the civilian sense on your own, and now all of a sudden you're an instructor, but that doesn't mean you're good at it.
Yeah, but also you might be, right? And that's the hard part, is everybody who has a vested interest. So there's a couple questions here. I'm going to get to them, and then we're going to just wrap up. No one who has an interest in creating that database has an interest in limiting it. And what I mean by that is, if you want to have a website for trainers to post their classes, you want all the trainers, right? If you want to post a website, if you're NSSF and you want to say, look at how many instructors there are in the country training people to be responsible with their guns, you want all the instructors listed. If you're the NRA, you want to say we have 90,000 instructors, 42,000 of them were in World War II, very active, they're dead. But don't worry about that. We have certified 90,000 instructors. It's like, okay, neat. But so when you go, if you go to intuitiveshooting.com, right, in the active column, we probably have we've been doing instructor development since 2005 for the military, 2006 open enrollment, probably certified a couple hundred people in the private sector, another few hundred people in the public sector that only teach in their law enforcement or military environments. And there's probably 30 or 40 at any given time that are listed as active instructors. Now they aren't employees. It sounds big, right? If I have 40 instructors teaching my stuff, nobody in this country has 40 instructors on a payroll teaching their material that's not a government entity, right? So even the big ranges that I know, Gander Mountain was probably the closest, when they had 6 locations, and they had a staff of probably 60 people that were certified to teach. They were teaching a derivative of the then CFS program, now the IDS program. USCCA, right, the Defensive Shooting Fundamentals program, that is a derivative of the IDS program. There's a level 1 and a level 2. There's probably 300 or 400 DFS level 1 instructors. But if you call the USCCA right now and you say, hey, how many instructors do you guys have? They're going to tell you they probably have 3,500 to 4,000 instructors. The problem is the vast majority of those instructors are non-live fire certified concealed carry home defense, CCHDF, concealed carry home defense instructors, who are USCCA instructors, but they're not taught how to do live fire. They're allowed to teach the PowerPoint handout book presentation in the classroom and then go out to the range and basically do whatever they want, particularly anything they want that meets the state permit requirements. So they might be teaching you NRA style on the range. They'll be teaching you made up Tactical Joe style. Who knows what they're doing? They're just doing something else. The true live fire USCCA instructors are the defensive shooting fundamentals instructors. And again, there's only a few hundred of them that are certified fully, because it's really hard to get certified. You understand how we do that. So there is a struggle, and endorsements, reviews. Yeah, if you really dig into them and you know who's writing them and their perspective, does that person's, because if a Navy SEAL tells you it's the greatest training in the world and you're not a Navy SEAL, it might not be the reason to go take that class, right? So does the person giving the review meet the criteria? These things are all incredibly important. I want to not go too far down the road of training. These things are incredibly important to talking to anti-gunners or people who are pro-gun control as well. And this is this is my last question for you, Jerah, and then we're going to wrap this up. When you bump into that person who says, the cliche is Second Amendment, but I support Second Amendment, but this area of training is a huge one. And as educators, we have to confront this. And we've talked a lot about it, but so let's on the training side, but let's move to something else. Let's say it is the universal background checks. It's the NFA. Maybe they don't even know what NFA is. Maybe it's the machine guns. I don't think it should be easy to just buy a machine gun out of a vending machine. How do you have the conversation with them, knowing that they're not going to be swayed by, shall not be infringed? They wouldn't be saying it. How do you have the conversation with that person who's a gun owner, but they're okay with magazine capacity bans, universal background checks, whatever? 3 minutes or less, go.
Well, I actually just had this conversation with someone the other day, and it ended up going down a rabbit hole, but they asked me that we said the same thing. I don't think that anybody should have an assault rifle or a full auto, but I think that handguns, are okay. And my first sort of point to them was, for me, learning handgun was much harder than learning a long gun, first of all. So I don't really see the correlation of, long guns are bad versus handguns being okay or acceptable. And I think that's once again a testament to the ignorance of how these people are educated on firearms, number one. Number two, if people are pro-choice, they have to be pro-choice about everything. And that was kind of a rabbit hole that we got down, me and this lady. And I don't know that I changed her mind yet, but I definitely got her thinking about it. I was like, you wouldn't want me to infringe on your ability to choose whether or not to have a baby. So why would you infringe on me being able to have 14 rounds versus 10 rounds? That's just silly. I mean, you can kill somebody with one. You can kill somebody with one round. So what's the difference between having 10, 15, 20, or 30, right? And then we talked about actually the shooting at the mosque in New Zealand. And I put out the point of, I watched that thing. I watched that whole video. Somebody actually sent it to me before they took it off Facebook. I was like, and they had 4 really great opportunities to take that guy down, and not one of them even needed a gun. He had 2 malfunctions and he had 2 reloads. If you understand the value of time, and that the average human, and you only understand these things if you're educated in it, if you take the time to learn it, the average human can clear 21 feet in less than a second, or right out a second, right? So if you think about that and the value of time and how long does it take to get a new magazine into an AR, they had plenty of time to take that person down. So it's not about whether or not it should be, I support the Second Amendment, but it's about, the point that I made to her is we have to take it out of party politics. It has to be more fundamental than the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. It has to be above that, more than that. And that's the only way that we get to it.
So you tricked me. You tricked me into going past the 30 minutes of solid content for the series, because I have to throw this out there, and this is, you're gonna be mad at me, but we'll have a virtual FaceTime drink later. The person that then says, as the follow-up, well, you just admitted that if somebody's trying to kill a whole bunch of people in a public space, the reloading creates an opportunity for them to be stopped. So wouldn't it make sense then to have high capacity magazines restricted? What's your response there? Because I think I know what it is. There's a whole bunch of good ones. What is your response there?
Oh my gosh. Tell me yours first. I want to hear yours.
Oh, I knew you would be mad at me because I put you on the spot because you have no power and you're rescuing puppies and stuff in the snow. Well, first of all, the guy who's trying to kill a bunch of people in public might not be following the law. Just going out on a limb with that, right? Like the guy who's trying to kill all the people.
So that's what I was gonna say, but then you would say that's too easy.
No, but it is too easy. But it's also that's right. That's the thing, right? It's like that's how easy it is. It's just like you're going so far down the road when people, because this is, you made this point earlier, right? And that's why I thought you were going to go right there, because you made this point earlier that there's one bullet can kill someone, right? If you will yield things like that, you deflate so many people's arguments because they think you're going to be like, no, people don't get killed by guns, right? Because that's sort of the official thing. We don't ever want to admit negative outcomes. When you say, look, how far are you going to go restricting things because of suicide? Because if you're restricting something because of suicide, you're going to be down to a single shot 22 and you're going to realize, oh, somebody can take their life with that too. Okay, all guns. And that's still not going to help because they can jump out the building, jump in front of the train. So you're not going to get rid of it. So if you yield, yeah, you're right. If the guy's willing to kill a bunch of kids in the school, he might strap 2 magazines together. He might get a 3D printer and print out a 57-round magazine or something because he's already so far gone from normal human behavior. Your law is not going to have any effect, right? Like,
well, but
so
and furthermore, hold on. But furthermore, I mean, do laws really prevent crimes, or are they just a written consequence to crimes committed?
Right. That is the intimidation factor. So it goes back to the French guy that because I'm going to get punished because I hit him with the drink or with the glass, I'm now being intimidated into doing the right thing as opposed to just doing the right thing and accepting, by the way, the reality of the fact that some people are going to try to hit you with a glass and you don't even know why. It may not even be your fault. With me, it probably was my fault in some way. But people are going to try to hit you with a glass. So I have to be prepared to defend myself from the glass hitting in my face, right? Or at least realize that I might get hit in the face and wake up against the wall and need to start fighting really fast, right? From a counter ambush mentality. So I had to get that in there because I know that when I post this, especially when I post this from Second Amendment organization and people who are pro-gun control, people who are anti-gun are going to look at this and they're going to say, well, wait a minute, that you just kind of undid your argument. And it's like, no. Looking for the opportunity to stop the bad guy is about self-preservation, self-awareness, and understanding the physics of reality, right? Suggesting that we're going to make killing people more than this much more illegal than killing people only like this much, that it
doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
but I think at the end of the day, we can't give up on the opportunity to reach people who are starting to understand just because they didn't maybe vote the way that we wanted them to. And we have to, and most people aren't single issue voters. I mean, to me, it's fundamental, like you lose my vote if you're anti-gun, like you just automatically lose it. But if you're pro-gun, pro-Second Amendment, and you have some other things going for you, we can talk, even if I don't agree with all of them, because you're never going to find a politician that's going to give you everything you want. So quit taking that.
Agreed. Right. It's definitely true. So I do appreciate, there were a whole bunch of really good questions and comments in here. I may go back into it. Maybe Jerah will find some time later too to jump back in there and throw some actual written answers out, because again, I'm trying to keep these relatively tight for the series. And I greatly appreciate, again, all the work that you do. If someone is interested in more communication with you or mentorship as an instructor or anything else you're doing, where they find you go?
You can email me, clearingthechamber@gmail.com, or I'm on Facebook and Instagram @clearingthechamber. And that's it.
Cool. All right. You're watching this, so you know how to find me. And I'll be back with more insight from some people I respect in the community on this topic. Thanks.